Sorry about that. The committee will come to order. We will now continue with the hearing, the question and answer period, and I now yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Iowa, Mrs. Hinson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you, Director Young, for coming before us today. I look forward to hearing your answers to our questions. I'd like to start off by thanking our ranking member, Smith, for pointing out that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will expire as a part of this budget, raising taxes on working families in Iowa. It raises taxes on our small businesses, on firefighters, on teachers, on shift workers building tractors, and on the healthcare heroes who have dedicated their lives to making others healthy, especially through a pandemic. We're going to reward them with a tax increase. I just finished my 5th 20-county tour across the district, held a telephone town hall last night. There is a clear, consistent theme from my constituents, what I'm hearing on the ground, what I heard on that last night, and that is the concern about rising prices. So whether it's farm repairs, farm inputs, the price at the pump for gas, the increases in everyday goods like groceries, bacon, milk, working families are struggling right now to continue to put food on the table, and that is largely because of the administration's policies. And we know increased federal spending is driving up these costs, and yet the president's budget request proposes $73 trillion in spending over the next 10 years with a projected $14 trillion impact on the deficit. That's a tab that is up to the next generation to have to pay. We're leaving that for them. Inflation today is at 7.9%, the highest it's been in 4 decades, and yet the president's budget plan assumes inflation will only be 2.3% through the next foreseeable future here, all the way to 2032. This is just out of touch, and we've heard why that is so, but I asked you a little bit about this same issue last year. Here we are a year later with even worse inflation than what we had a year ago. So my question is, why is the administration continuing to make these claims that are out of touch about inflation, low inflation here, high inflation with what we're paying at the grocery store and what consumers are actually facing, because that's affecting Iowans every single day?
Yeah, we hear you, Mrs. Hinson, and we share your concerns. We might disagree on the proposals to get inflation under control, but the president's concerned about these cost pressures on Americans. You mentioned farmers. We have worked at the administration, for example, to ensure that those who work farms can, for example, fix their own equipment. We have found that there's not competition always, and people have
right
to
to
go.
repair is a completely different issue from what I'm asking about here. I'm asking why specifically you're not being accurate in your accounting of inflation here, because I mean, if you're making a budget projection based on numbers that are wrong, that's irresponsible and disrespectful to taxpayers.
Well, actually, the numbers were baked in November. That's how budgets work. We have to close the books at some point and send you a budget. But I hope you know that inflation both has an offsetting effect. Both revenues usually go up with higher inflation, as well as spending. Therefore, the long-term projections are not affected by a different inflation rate. But you're absolutely right. It is higher than our estimates were in November when we locked what we affectionately call a database.
Well, I hope going forward that we can be cognizant of the fact that those numbers are inaccurate. So as we as a committee are continuing to work with you and your office, being cognizant that these numbers are not right is going to be crucial as we're making the right decisions. I'm glad you mentioned farmers in this administration, because Americans are struggling with the cost of fuel. This includes billions of dollars in funding for EVs and charging infrastructure. These taxpayer dollars do nothing to actually drive down the cost of fuel for Iowans, but the subsidies will make inflation even worse. And on the campaign trail, the president came to Iowa and looked Iowans in the eye and said he could count on him for a new era of biofuels, quoting the president here, "Lip service won't make up for nearly 4 years of retroactive damage that has decimated our trade economy and forced ethanol plants to shutter." So we've heard that it's already not in this budget, but I'm wondering why? Why is it not in this budget? Why does the administration break their promise here to Iowans and Americans to not support the usage of renewable biofuels, domestic fuels, domestic energy production like ethanol?
Thank you for bringing this up, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to fully address this with Mr. Feenstra. This budget, as you all know, starts October 1. Many of the inflationary increases we're seeing in gas have to do with the Russia-Ukraine situation. We have to deal with that fluid situation before this budget even takes effect. So we are happy with the $13 billion this Congress provided to help with assistance to Ukraine, but the gas situation, in addition to selling 60 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, we'll also be looking to other things in which to bring down costs for Americans, but that's going to be before this budget takes effect.
Well, we're looking at, obviously, projections here for many years out, so I think Iowans want to know why it's not included. If you're having conversations about all these other things in the future, why is biofuels noticeably missing? My final question, we've had, obviously, 2 million encounters at the southern border. We saw some increased funding for CBP in the omnibus and a supplemental there, but we're back at square one here with these cuts, to propose cuts to the CBP. So again, why is that happening?
You see actually a 5% increase to DHS, including for agents. Many in our party will disagree, but we believe there is a necessity for additional personnel to ensure that we have an orderly immigration system. In addition to that, we have an increase for immigration judges to make sure we move people through the legal system. So we absolutely have put forth what we believe is a balanced approach to deal with the border.
Well,
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
thank you, I yield
let's
back.
go.